make sure you're sending and not receiving. And choose if you're going to send or receive. Now, I'm not saying talk and listen, because when you're sending, sometimes you talk, but there's other ways to send. And so when you're receiving, sometimes you just listen, but sometimes when you're receiving, you say things like uh-huh, or great, or way to go, or tell me more, or lovely, or other things. Or I think you said da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So when you're receiving, you're not just listening, you're sometimes talking. When you're sending, you're not just talking. You're sometimes making gestures. You're sometimes playing a song or a soundtrack, or you're showing a picture, or you're touching someone. The point is, distinguish sending and receiving. And when you're going to send, make sure you choose it. And then only send when you have a receiver. It's so often that people try to send when nobody's receiving. And I don't just mean nobody's listening. They might look like they're listening. I've written a lot about listening. I've talked to all of you a lot about listening. And it's a powerful tool, but it's not the only one. But if you don't have somebody who's a dedicated receiver, I recommend that you not send. Because if you are sending and there's no one there to receive, you cannot send on purpose. So what do? Well, you ask for one. If you don't have a receiver, that's the first thing to do is ask, and until you get a dedicated receiver. Or just listen, just receive, just be the receiver. Because I find that after I have received and received and received, or listened and listened and listened, eventually I can get the other person to receive for a while. Now, with some people in my life, I got to listen about 5 times longer than I send. But eventually, I can. So once I got a receiver, then the next thing to do is to clarify my purpose. So the way to send on purpose is, of course, you have to know your purpose. You have to be clear about the purpose of the message so that you can have it fit into the purpose of your life. I do this all the time. For example, I clarified my purpose of sending you that birthday message. I clarified the purpose of sending when I had the ears of the people at my birthday party. I had 60 people at my birthday party, and I knew I was going to get to speak to them, and I knew they would listen intently. And I worked on what is my purpose in sending to them. That's at a party. Now, the other thing I recommend that you do is speak your purpose to another. I don't mean the person you're sending to. I mean, once you get clear about what the purpose of your message is, then tell another person, not the person you're going to speak to, but tell another person what your purpose is. So, for example, before I spoke at my birthday, and before I spoke to you tonight about this topic, I spoke to my coach, Stan Lankwitz, about my purpose. And I wrote my purpose. So not only speak your purpose to another, but actually write it down. Because when you write it, it's more clear. So now you know your purpose, you've spoken your purpose, you've written your purpose. Next recommendation I have before you send is to consider how the receiver will listen. Because everybody listens different. So you want to kind of pay attention to the way in which the person you're sending is going to listen. Like, what are their preconceptions? What are their points of view? What are their values? What's their history? What are their trigger points? How strong is your relationship with them? So in other words, you're really now, once you know your purpose for sending, you're thinking about how the other person will receive what you send. Then I'm recommending before you send on purpose, you actually outline your message in writing. Not write it. You can write the whole thing, but I think it gets a little cumbersome, so I think it's a little easier if you actually outline it. So you write down your key points and your sub-points. You could maybe even draw a mind map of it. If you don't use mind maps, you could read about those in Falling Awake or Human Being, or got a real big section in Becoming a Master Student on mind mapping. But mind map is like an outline. So you outline in writing your message. Then, when you're considering sending, considering lots of different modalities. I talked about this briefly just 3 minutes ago, because sending is not just talking. It's like your facial expressions. They send a lot. They really do. You know, most of you have been in my workshops when I joke about how you may think you're happy, but somebody ought to tell your face. But really, facial expressions send a lot, or body movements. Subtle body movements send a lot of information. Touch, you might want to include that in your sending. Or emotion, really allow out your emotion. Emotion moves. Emotion creates motion. Some of the most powerful people that I know who send on purpose send with extraordinary emotion. I showed you just a few minutes ago, a picture of Lynn Twist, who she's one of my clients. And when I was at this meeting with her, I was facilitating the meeting. Even in that meeting when she spoke, she cried twice. This woman knows how to send with emotion, and she's one of the most powerful speakers I've ever heard. Also, media. You can send with media, just like today I'm sending with this webinar. You can, even in a one-on-one communication, you can have a picture or a chart or a graph. You can use music. You can use videos. Yeah, all those things. So bring media into your message. And you can also imagine you're not just speaking to one other person. You know, information is conveyed to groups using all those modalities. And we forget that we can convey information to one person using all those modalities. Well, my next idea when sending on purpose is to rehearse before you send. Really, literally rehearse, and rehearse out loud. All great communicators rehearse. Rehearse with your purpose in mind. Rehearse maybe in front of another person even. I rehearse communications, I'll bet, 4 hours a week. So, for example, this communication I'm giving you right now, I rehearsed it with Stan. I rehearsed parts of it with Joanne and Bill. I rehearsed it all with Alejandro when he was creating this media. Because I believe that all great communicators, whether you're communicating to one person or a bunch, they rehearse. Politicians rehearse. We just saw that great movie, The King's Speech. Actors, of course, rehearse. Political leaders rehearse. And now you rehearse. It's a very powerful way to send on purpose. Then when you actually start to send, you've got your purpose in mind, you rehearsed, you've got your outline written, you've got different modalities. Postpone receiving. Do not, when you're sending, don't receive. And if you're tempted, like the other person starts to talk, just put your hand up and say, just a second, I'm not quite done. Just keep going. And with an intention to really penetrate the other person with your message. Because you're sending now. You know, don't be shy about it. Don't withhold your power. Really send until you're complete. You're the lead. Take the lead. Sending is a leadership role. For those of you who want to be more powerful leaders, send. And really serve the receiver. That's what powerful sending on purpose does. It's serving the receiver.